What happens when an entitled flight attendant decides a passenger doesn't belong in first class based entirely on the color of her skin? She gets comfortable. She gets arrogant. But she didn't realize the woman she just refused to serve literally owned the plane. 10 minutes later, the entire crew was fired mid-air. The harsh fluorescent lights of John F. Kennedy International Airport's Terminal 4 did little to dull the quiet luxury of the first-class boarding lane. Flight 402, a direct red-eye to London Heathrow aboard a Boeing 777-300ER, was preparing for departure. Clara Jenkins handed her passport and boarding pass to the gate agent. Clara was a woman who didn't feel the need to broadcast her success. She wore a simple, unbranded charcoal cashmere sweater, tailored black slacks and comfortable loafers. Her hair was pulled back into a neat, no-nonsense bun. She looked like a woman traveling for business, which she was, but nothing about her understated appearance screamed billionaire. And that was exactly how she preferred it. Just 36 hours prior, the private equity firm where Clara served as managing partner had completed a hostile takeover of Trans-Global Airways, the very airline she was currently flying. She was flying unannounced to London to evaluate the executive board. As Clara stepped onto the aircraft, the familiar hum of the Rolls-Royce engines vibrated through the floorboards. She turned left into the exclusive first-class cabin, a sanctuary of plush lie-flat pods, mahogany veneer, and ambient warm lighting. Standing at the front of the cabin was Beatrice Gable. Beatrice was a veteran flight attendant of nearly 20 years, impeccably groomed with a rigid posture and a smile that never quite reached her eyes. Beatrice viewed herself as the absolute gatekeeper of airborne luxury. Over the years, she had developed a specific, highly prejudiced mental profile of who deserved to sit in her cabin. Tech moguls in hoodies were fine. They were eccentric. Wealthy socialites laden with designer logos were her bread and butter. But as Clara Jenkins, a black woman in an unbranded sweater, walked down the aisle and began to stow her leather tote bag in the overhead bin above seat 2, Beatrice's smile vanished. Her posture stiffened. Beatrice approached her tone, dripping with the kind of saccharine sweetness that masked deep condescension. "Excuse me, ma'am," Beatrice said, her voice loud enough to turn the heads of the passengers in row 1, a wealthy British couple named Arthur and Penelope Wright. "I think you've made a wrong turn. Premium economy and main cabin are through the curtain to your right." Clara paused, her hand still resting on the latch of the overhead bin. She looked at Beatrice, maintaining a neutral expression. "I'm in the right place. Seat 2A. Beatrice let out a breathy, patronizing chuckle. "Ma'am, please, this is international first class. I need you to clear the aisle so our ticketed passengers can board." Clara didn't argue. She simply pulled her phone from her pocket, tapped the screen, and held the digital boarding pass up to Beatrice's face. The screen glowed brightly. Clara Jenkins. Seat 2, A first class. Beatrice's jaw tightened. Her eyes darted from the screen to Clara's face, searching for some sign of a glitch, a mistake, or perhaps an employee non-rev travel pass. But it was a full-fare revenue ticket. "I see," Beatrice said, her voice dropping an octave, the fake customer service warmth entirely gone. She didn't apologize. She didn't offer a welcome. Instead, she spun on her heel and marched back to the forward galley. Clara took her seat, letting out a slow, quiet breath. She had dealt with this kind of microaggression her entire life. The assumptions, the underestimation. Usually she let it slide, focusing on her monumental goals. But today, sitting in an aircraft owned by a company she now controlled, the blatant disrespect struck a different chord. 10 minutes later, the boarding doors were closed. The cabin was a hushed haven of anticipation. Beatrice emerged from the galley, pushing the silver pre-departure beverage cart. She was accompanied by Jack Crowley, the flight's purser. Jack was a tall, imposing man who had flown with Beatrice for years. They were thick as thieves and shared the same archaic, elitist worldviews. Champagne Mr. Right, Mrs. Right, Beatrice cooed, pouring the vintage Dom Perignon into crystal flutes with an exaggerated flourish. She laughed at a terrible joke Arthur Wright made, then moved down the aisle. She stopped at seat 1B, serving a young, scruffy tech entrepreneur. Then she pulled the cart directly past Clara in 2A, coming to a dead stop at 3A to serve a middle-aged corporate lawyer. Clara watched the cart roll past her. The omission was so glaring, so deliberate, that even the tech entrepreneur in 1B frowned in confusion. "Excuse me," Clara said, her voice clear and carrying over the ambient noise of the cabin. "I haven't received a drink." Beatrice didn't even turn around. She kept her back to Clara, continuing to pour for the passenger in 3A. "I'll be with you in a moment," she snapped loudly. 5 minutes passed. The captain made his welcome announcement. The cart was rolled back into the galley. Beatrice walked briskly past Clara's seat, her eyes fixed straight ahead, collecting the empty glasses from the other passengers. "Miss," Clara said, stopping her, "you forgot my pre-departure beverage." Beatrice looked down at Clara, her eyes narrowing into cold slits. "I didn't forget," she said, leaning in slightly, so only Clara and the immediate surrounding passengers could hear. "We only cater enough premium vintage for our traditional full-fare first-class clientele. I assumed you were an operational upgrade given, well, you understand. I can get you a tap water if you're parched." Clara stared at her. The audacity was breathtaking. The assumption that she hadn't paid for her seat, weaponized as an excuse to deny her basic service, was a textbook display of systemic prejudice. "I paid full fare," Clara said, her voice icy and completely steady. "And even if I hadn't, your job is to serve every passenger in this cabin equally." "My job," Beatrice retorted, her lips curling into a sneer, "is to manage this cabin as I see fit. Now please, sit back and buckle your seatbelt. You're holding up our taxi." Clara watched the flight attendant walk away. A quiet, dangerous calm settled over her. She reached into her bag and pulled out her laptop. If Beatrice wanted to play games regarding who belonged in this cabin, Clara was going to change the rules of the entire airline. The Boeing 777 broke through the heavy cloud cover over the Atlantic, leveling out at a cruising altitude of 35,000 feet. The seatbelt sign chimed off, and the cabin lights dimmed to a soft, relaxing indigo. The scent of warmed rosemary nuts and roasting beef fillet began to drift from the forward galley. It was time for the main dinner service. Clara sat quietly in her pod, working on her laptop. She was reviewing the structural reorganization documents for Trans-Global Airways. Ironically, one of the major complaints flagged in the acquisition due diligence was the airline's plummeting customer satisfaction scores, specifically regarding the inconsistent and discriminatory culture among senior cabin crew. Now she was experiencing it firsthand. Beatrice emerged with the white linen tablecloths. She meticulously draped one over Arthur Wright's tray table, chatting amiably about London weather. She did the same for the other passengers. When she reached row 2, she walked right past Clara's pod, moving directly to row 3. Clara waited. She wanted to give Beatrice every opportunity to correct her behavior. 15 minutes went by. The clinking of silverware echoed through the cabin. The scent of food was overwhelming. Every single passenger in the first-class cabin was eating except Clara. Clara reached up and pressed the overhead call button. A soft ding echoed, and a blue light illuminated above her pod. From her vantage point, Clara could see directly down the aisle into the open galley. Beatrice was standing there chatting with Jack the purser. They were eating leftover crew meals. Beatrice looked down the aisle, made direct eye contact with Clara, and then reached out to the galley control panel. She pressed a button. The blue light above Clara's seat instantly extinguished. The call was cancelled. Clara raised an eyebrow. She waited exactly 60 seconds and pressed it again. Ding. This time Jack rolled his eyes. He muttered something to Beatrice, who laughed, and then he reached out and cancelled the call light again. The tech entrepreneur in 1B leaned across the aisle. "Hey," he whispered to Clara, looking uncomfortable. "Are they seriously ignoring you? Do you want me to say something?" "Thank you, no," Clara said softly, a small razor-sharp smile playing on her lips. "I prefer to handle my own investments." The man looked confused by the choice of words, but nodded and went back to his steak. Clara closed her laptop. She unbuckled her seatbelt, stood up, and walked slowly and deliberately up the aisle toward the forward galley. As she pulled back the heavy curtain, the laughter between Beatrice and Jack abruptly stopped. They turned to look at her, their expressions instantly hardening into masks of defensive authority. "Ma'am, you cannot be in the galley," Jack commanded, stepping forward to block her path. "It is a violation of federal aviation safety protocols." "I have been waiting for my meal," Clara said, her voice perfectly measured. "My call button has been repeatedly ignored and manually reset. I want to know why." Beatrice scoffed, crossing her arms. "We are in the middle of our service flow. If you would just sit down and be patient, we would get to you. Everyone else in the cabin is currently eating their main course," Clara pointed out. "I wasn't even offered a menu, nor a tablecloth, nor a drink." "Are you accusing me of something?" Beatrice demanded, stepping out from behind Jack, her face flushed with indignation. "Because I don't appreciate your tone. You've been demanding and disruptive since you boarded my aircraft." "My aircraft?" The irony almost made Clara laugh. "I'm accusing you of failing to do your job," Clara said smoothly. "I am requesting your names and employee identification numbers." Jack puffed out his chest, trying to use his height to intimidate her. He reached toward a nearby compartment and pulled out a warning card, a written notice handed to unruly passengers before zip-tie restraints are used or authorities are called upon landing. "Listen to me very carefully," Jack said, his voice a low, menacing rumble. "I am the purser on this flight. My word is law in this cabin. If you do not return to your seat immediately and cease harassing my crew, I will write you up for a federal disturbance. I will have the captain radio ahead, and you will be met by armed police at Heathrow. You will be placed on a no-fly list. Do you understand me?" He was banking on fear. He was banking on the fact that a black woman, when threatened with police action, would instinctively back down to protect herself from a system that historically didn't favor her. Clara looked at the warning card in his hand. Then she looked at Jack, then at Beatrice, who was smirking triumphantly in the background. "I understand perfectly," Clara said. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't cause a scene. She simply turned around and walked back through the curtain. When she sat back down, in seat 2A, her hands were steady. The trap had been set, and they had walked right into it with alarming enthusiasm. It was no longer just about poor service. It was about a deeply ingrained culture of entitlement, racism, and intimidation that she had zero intention of keeping on her payroll. Clara opened her laptop again. She bypassed the standard slow passenger Wi-Fi network and opened a secure portal. She typed in a proprietary security key, instantly connecting her to the aircraft's high-speed Q-band satellite link, a connection normally reserved for the flight deck and operational data. She opened her encrypted company messenger. "Clara Jenkins David, are you awake?" A moment later, the chat bubble popped up. It was David Sterling. Wait, no, David Harrison, the executive vice president of airline operations in Chicago. David Harrison. Yes, Clara. Just finishing the press release for the acquisition. How is the stealth flight, Clara Jenkins? Enlightening. I need you to pull the crew manifest for my current flight. Trans-Global Airways Flight 402, JFK to LHR. David Harrison. Pulling it now. Is there an issue? Clara Jenkins, a significant one. I have a purser named Jack and a flight attendant named Beatrice. I need their full profiles, their disciplinary records, and I need you to patch me directly to the chief pilot of the airline, as well as our legal team. We are going to make an unprecedented administrative change. David Harrison. Right now, Clara, you're over the Atlantic. Clara Jenkins. I am well aware of my altitude, David. Convene the emergency board digitally. I want these two terminated. Not suspended. Terminated. And I want it done before this plane touches down in London. She hit send. The quiet hum of the 777's engines felt different now. It didn't just feel like a machine carrying her across the ocean. It felt like an instrument of absolute, uncompromising karma. The silence in Clara's first-class pod was absolute, save for the rhythmic, muffled roar of the twin Rolls-Royce engines. High above the Atlantic, the cabin remained entirely oblivious to the digital shockwave currently racing through the airline's terrestrial servers. On Clara's screen, a secure PDF document materialized. David Harrison, her executive vice president back in Chicago, had bypassed the standard human resources bureaucracy with the stroke of a master key. Clara Jenkins, I have the file, David. Reviewing now. Clara opened the dossier on Beatrice Gable. The screen illuminated her face in a harsh white light as she scrolled through the flight attendant's employment history. It was worse than she had anticipated. Over an 18-year career, Beatrice had accumulated 7 formal HR complaints. 3 were for culturally insensitive remarks toward international passengers. 2 involved refusing to upgrade minority passengers despite their elite status, actively bypassing them for white passengers with lower-tier loyalty profiles. She opened Jack Crowley's file. It was a mirror image of the same systemic rot. 5 complaints of aggressive intimidation, specifically targeting passengers of color who dared to question his authority. How had they survived this long? Clara found the answer in the margins of the reports. The previous executive board, the very board Clara's firm had just ruthlessly dismantled, had a standing policy of burying passenger complaints to appease the senior flight attendant union. They protected their oldest, most traditional crew members, creating an environment where people like Beatrice and Jack felt entirely untouchable. They were the rotting foundation of Trans-Global Airways, and Clara was the bulldozer. Clara Jenkins. The negligence here is staggering. David, patch me through to the flight deck. Connect with Captain Thomas Mitchell. He's the pilot in command on this routing. David Harrison, routing the connection through the SATCOM secure line now. It will print directly on their ACARS terminal. Give it 30 seconds. Up in the flight deck, the atmosphere was relaxed. Captain Thomas Mitchell, a 30-year veteran of the skies, was sipping black coffee while his first officer monitored the autopilot's progress along the North Atlantic track. Suddenly, the ACR's aircraft communications, addressing and reporting system printer beside the center console sprang to life. It began chattering loudly, spitting out a strip of thermal paper. The first officer tore it off and scanned it, his brow furrowed in deep confusion. Captain, we just got a priority message. Level Alpha. Direct from Operations Control in Chicago. Level Alpha. Captain Mitchell set his coffee down, his posture instantly straightening. Alpha messages were reserved for critical emergencies, security threats, or severe operational changes. Read it. The first officer swallowed hard. It reads, urgent communique to Captain Thomas Mitchell, by direct order of the Board of Directors and Clara Jenkins, Managing Partner, Apex Capital / controlling owner of Trans Global Airways. Purser Jack Crowley and Flight Attendant Beatrice Gable are to be relieved of all in-flight duties immediately. They are terminated for gross misconduct. Confirm receipt and execution of order. Captain Mitchell stared at the piece of paper. He read it 3 times. Clara Jenkins, the private equity firm that bought us out yesterday. She's... He paused, his eyes widening as a realization struck him. He pulled up the passenger manifest on his digital flight bag. He scrolled down to first class. Seat 2, a Jenkins Clara. Good God, Mitchell whispered. She's on the plane. He didn't hesitate. You didn't become a senior captain by questioning a direct verified order from the absolute top of the corporate food chain. He reached over and picked up the interphone, pressing the sequence to call the forward galley. Down in the galley, Jack Crowley picked up the receiver, a smug smile still plastered on his face. He assumed the captain was calling to check in on the unruly passenger situation he had bragged about earlier. Go ahead, flight deck. This is your purser, Jack said smoothly. Jack. Captain Mitchell's voice was clipped, devoid of its usual friendly cadence. I need you in the flight deck, right now. Do not bring the cart. Just you. Jack frowned, glancing at Beatrice, who was reapplying her lipstick in a small mirror. Understood, Captain. He hung up. Mitchell wants me up front. Probably wants an update on 2A. Keep the champagne flowing for the rights, Beatrice. I'll be right back. Jack punched the security code into the reinforced cockpit door, waited for the click, and stepped inside. He closed the heavy door behind him. Captain, if this is about the woman in 2A, I have it entirely under control. Jack started puffing out his chest. I've already issued her a verbal warning and... Shut your mouth, Jack, Captain Mitchell snapped. Jack froze. The air in the cockpit was freezing cold. Both pilots were staring at him, not with camaraderie, but with absolute pity and disgust. Mitchell held up the strip of thermal paper. I have just received a Level Alpha direct order from corporate headquarters. As of 2 minutes ago, you and Beatrice Gable are officially terminated from your employment with Trans Global Airways. Jack's mouth opened, but no sound came out. The blood drained from his face so fast, he looked as though he might faint. Terminated what? Tom, you can't be serious. The union can't save you from the person who literally owns the company. Jack Mitchell barked, slamming his hand on the console. Clara Jenkins, the woman you've been harassing in 2A. She is the managing partner of the firm that bought this airline yesterday. She is your ultimate boss. Or she was. Jack physically stumbled backward, hitting the reinforced door, his mind short-circuited. The unbranded sweater, the quiet confidence, the refusal to back down. He had looked at a billionaire CEO and seen only a stereotype he could bully. You are stripped of your authority, Captain Mitchell commanded, his voice turning to steel. You will surrender your company ID and your wings to me right now. You will return to the cabin. You will inform Beatrice of her termination, and the 2 of you will sit in the aft jump seats in complete silence for the remainder of this flight. You will not serve another drink. You will not speak to another passenger. Do you understand me? Jack's hands shook uncontrollably as he reached up and unpinned the silver wings from his lapel. He placed them on the center console next to his ID badge. His career of 22 years, built on a foundation of entitlement and unchecked prejudice, had just been vaporized in less than 10 minutes. Yes, Captain, Jack choked out. Get out of my flight deck, Mitchell ordered. The quiet hum of the first-class cabin was abruptly broken by the sound of the flight deck door opening and closing. Clara watched from the corner of her eye as Jack Crowley walked back into the forward galley. His imposing, authoritative swagger was completely gone. He looked hollowed out, moving with the sluggish, uncoordinated steps of a man walking to the gallows. Beatrice was standing by the espresso machine, preparing a cappuccino for the tech entrepreneur in 1B. She looked up, her smile faltering as she saw Jack's face. "Jack, what's wrong? Did Tom call the authorities for Heathrow?" she whispered excitedly, clearly eager for the drama. Jack didn't answer right away. He simply stared at her, his eyes wide and vacant. Then he reached out, grabbed Beatrice by the elbow, and pulled her roughly behind the privacy curtain of the galley. Clara couldn't hear the exact words spoken, but she didn't need to. The body language visible through the slight gap in the curtain told the entire story. She saw Jack gesturing wildly. She saw Beatrice shake her head in aggressive denial. And then a piercing gasp echoed from behind the curtain. It was a sound of pure, unadulterated terror. A moment later, Beatrice burst through the curtain. Her immaculate grooming suddenly looked chaotic. Her face was flushed a deep, blotchy crimson. Her eyes frantically scanned the cabin until they locked onto Clara in seat 2A. Panic completely overrode Beatrice's remaining shred of professionalism. She practically ran down the aisle, coming to a sliding halt beside Clara's pod. The other passengers, including Arthur and Penelope Wright, stopped eating their forks, hovering in mid-air as they stared at the unfolding spectacle. Miss Jenkins!" Beatrice stammered, her voice shaking violently. She reached out her hands, hovering as if she wanted to grab Clara's arm, but she stopped herself. "There has been a terrible misunderstanding. Please, you must listen to me. I didn't know who you were. I swear if I had known—" Clara finally looked up from her laptop. She slowly closed the screen. She looked at Beatrice not with anger, but with an icy, clinical detachment that was infinitely more terrifying. "That is precisely the point, Beatrice," Clara said, her voice carrying clearly through the silent cabin. "You didn't know who I was. And because you didn't know I signed your paychecks, you believed you had the right to treat me as less than human. You believed my skin color dictated my worth in this cabin. No, that's not it at all. I was just—" "Save it," Clara interrupted, her tone snapping like a whip. "Your HR file reads like a textbook on systemic discrimination. You built a career on making people who don't look like you feel small. But today, you picked the wrong woman." The tech entrepreneur in 1B let out a low whistle, suddenly realizing exactly what was happening. Arthur Wright looked completely bewildered. "Please," Beatrice begged, tears now streaking her carefully applied makeup. "I have a pension. I have 20 years with this company. You can't just fire me in the middle of the ocean." "I already did," Clara stated coldly. "Your employment was terminated exactly 4 minutes ago. You are no longer authorized to be in this cabin. Surrender your company PIN and take your jump seat in the back of the aircraft." Beatrice stood, frozen, sobbing quietly. Jack appeared behind her, looking utterly defeated. He gently grabbed her shoulder. "Come on, Bea. It's over. We have to go to the back." The entire first-class cabin watched in stunned silence as the purser and the veteran flight attendant, stripped of their authority and their pride, slowly walked down the aisle, pushing through the curtain into the economy section, exiled from the luxury they had so viciously guarded. 10 seconds later, a young, slightly out-of-breath flight attendant nervously pushed back the forward curtain. Her name tag read, Emma. She looked terrified, but determined. She walked straight to Clara's pod. "Ms. Jenkins, I'm Emma." The captain just promoted me to acting purser for the remainder of the flight. I am so incredibly sorry for what you've experienced today. I would like to offer you our dinner service, starting immediately." Clara looked at the young woman. Emma's hands were shaking, but her eyes were sincere. She wasn't just terrified of the boss. She was genuinely appalled by what had happened. Clara's rigid posture finally softened. A genuine warm smile graced her face for the first time since she boarded. "Thank you, Emma. I would love a menu. And please just treat me exactly how you would treat the passenger in 1B or 3A. Nothing more, nothing less." "Yes, ma'am," Emma smiled back, visibly relieved. "Right away." The rest of the flight proceeded flawlessly. Emma provided impeccable, equitable service to every passenger in the cabin. Clara finally enjoyed her rosemary nuts and a perfectly cooked fillet, spending the remaining hours revising the new stringent anti-discrimination protocols she was going to roll out across the entire airline the moment she landed. 7 hours later, Flight 402 touched down smoothly on the tarmac at London Heathrow. As the aircraft taxied to the gate, the familiar chime of the seatbelt sign signaled their arrival. When the forward boarding door opened, it wasn't the standard gate agent who stepped on board. It was a team of 3 stern-looking individuals in dark suits, accompanied by 2 Heathrow Airport security officers. It was the London Director of Human Resources for Trans-Global Airways. "Ladies and gentlemen, please remain seated for just a moment longer," the captain announced over the PA system. The HR team walked directly past first class and headed straight to the aft jump seats. Minutes later they emerged, escorting Beatrice Gable and Jack Crowley up the aisle. They were not wearing their uniform jackets. They carried their luggage in silence, looking thoroughly broken. As they walked past row 2, Jack kept his eyes glued to the floor. Beatrice, however, couldn't help but look up. Her tear-streaked eyes met Clara's. Clara was standing by her seat, slipping her laptop into a tote bag. She looked back at Beatrice, her expression perfectly unreadable. "Have a safe trip home, Beatrice," Clara said quietly. "I hear the service in the main cabin can be incredibly inconsistent. I suppose you'll find out." Beatrice squeezed her eyes shut and kept walking, disappearing out the door and into the consequences of her own actions. Clara slung her bag over her shoulder. She stepped off the plane, walking past the bewildered ground staff, and headed toward passport control. She had a company to fix, a culture to overhaul, and a very busy week ahead. But as she walked through the terminal, her step was undeniably lighter. The trash had taken itself out, and the skies were already looking a little friendlier. Karma doesn't always wait for the next lifetime. Sometimes it catches up with you at 35,000 feet. True power isn't about looking the part. It's about how you treat people when you think no one important is watching. If this story of mid-air justice gave you chills, hit that like button, share it with someone who loves instant karma, and subscribe for more incredible real-life stories.